Okay, so today I'm going to be talking with Bobby Ann White, and she's going to tell you a little bit about herself, but she has an affiliation with Massachusetts General, a number of other hospitals, and we're going to be talking about the emotion roadmap and also about a particular case study that I'm using with caretakers, because we're using the emotion roadmap in multiple ways in business, in industry, in schools, in universities, in government, and also with caretaking. It's a recent project, and I'm very excited about the possibility that understanding how to manage your own emotions more effectively, how to influence other people's emotions, particularly on a very challenging subject like caretaking, when you find out a loved one has got a diagnosis of an illness that's ongoing and progressive, or someone that you love and care about is in an accident and has some kind of debilitating problems that causes them not to be able to do what they were doing, or you have a child on the spectrum and you have to be a caretaker right from the day one. There's all kinds of situations involving caretaking, and so I'm excited to present this to Bobby Ann, and also she's going to be sharing it with a group of students later. And now, Bobby Ann, you want to tell us a little bit about you?
Yes, thank you so much for setting this up and allowing us to learn from you. I'm looking forward to sharing all of this with my students. So, speak of my students, I am a full-time faculty member at MGH Institute of Health Professions, where I teach in their master's and PhD programs. And I have a couple of students that are looking at emotional intelligence and specifically emotions. Some of them are looking at kind of diagnosing what emotions are happening during simulation debriefing or what's going on with emotions and the training of residents. And so really my students are kind of diving into this space. And as Chuck and I discussed at a CREO meeting, this tool sounded really helpful for them maybe. And so just really looking forward to this. As far as I guess additional, I have other affiliations. I also work with the Department of Surgery at Baylor Scott and White Health. They may also be finding this of interest. So I'm looking forward to this. Thank you for recording it so I can share it with all of them.
Thanks. And just so for those people who don't know what CREO is, it's the Consortium for Research on Emotional Intelligence in Organizations. I like to think of it as sort of a think tank for emotional intelligence. Researchers from around the world gather together to share uh, kind of the innovative work that they're doing, share best practices, and that's where I know Bobby Ann and a number of other people that are really expert in their own ways in emotional intelligence. And so one of the areas I've gotten to be known in is for this, what I call an emotion roadmap. A bit about my background, for those of you first tuning into and learning about me, is I got involved with emotional intelligence back in the 1990s. And it was when Peter Salovey, who just is a former Yale president of Yale University, and his colleague Jack Mayer, a University of New Hampshire professor, first published about emotional intelligence back in 1990. They were the first ones to actually talk about the idea that we have another intelligence. And they were very pleased to hear that Dan Goleman, who at the time in the 1990s was a science editor for the New York Times, he would put in articles about psychology into the Tuesday section of the Times, talking about psychology. And he wanted to write a bit about them, and he did. And then Dan decided he was going to write a book. And his book was going to be called, he had a number of titles for the book, but eventually he settled on emotional intelligence. And he had a subtitle about why it might matter more than IQ. And when he talked to Peter Salovey about, would it be okay if he wrote about the work that Jack and Peter had done? Because Dan isn't so much a researcher as he is just somebody who collects lots of other people's research and makes them available to the public. And when Dan published this book, it opened up a window into a world that was largely unknown. For most people at work, it was keep your emotions at the door before you come in. Nobody was supposed to feel anything at work. Of course, that never happened, but people weren't dealing with it. But anyway, when Dan wrote his book, it got very popular very fast. And the reason we're talking about emotional intelligence today is because of all the excitement that got created when Dan's book kind of took off. And it became a bestseller in multiple languages. And Dan's written a number of books since then. Peter has written books. Jack's written some books. They've all written articles. And in the late 1990s, Peter and Jack and a colleague of theirs, David, asked me to come to work with them because they were interested in knowing how to take what they had studied in an academic lab and produce around this idea of emotional intelligence and make it useful to people. So now we know there's an intelligence, and what Peter and Jack had discovered and what they talked about was that there's abilities, that we have emotional abilities. And David and Jack and Peter, David Caruso, when he joined them, they all thought, one of the things that we're saying is if there are abilities, we should be able to measure them. And they decided to work together and collaborate, and they created what they called the multi-factor emotional intelligence scale. But they didn't have a publisher, and they needed a publisher. And somehow David and I were working in the same place at a time on Park Avenue in New York City. I didn't know David, but David had heard my reputation was that I was really good at taking theory and making it come alive. And that's what they had. They had a theory, and they wanted it to be useful. And so I got invited to work with them, and I did. And I found their work fascinating, but it was the work of academics and psychologists, and it was things that if you were a psychology student or a professor or a psychologist in practice, you were interested in their work, but you didn't. A lot of them very skeptical at first. But in any case, I looked at it and I thought, this is fascinating on multiple levels to me. It's one of the newest things in psychology. There wasn't much new in psychology for a whole lot of years, and this was. And I was excited to be invited to work with them. And I said, I don't know that people are going to read your articles in the workplace. Or even if they did, that they'd understand them unless they were statistically knowledgeable for some reason in some way. And besides, it wouldn't be helpful necessarily. But what I began to understand was what they were saying was that people have abilities, and their abilities were tied to four different branches, they called them. And one was the ability to identify how we're feeling. So if I'm looking at you, Bobby, how are you feeling? How am I feeling now? And then the use of emotion was a second ability, they said, which was how smart are you, or how able are you to use the right emotion for the right situation? Aristotle famously said, to be angry with the right person in the right way at the right time is a very difficult thing to do. But that was sort of the concept was how do you have the right emotion for the circumstance you find yourself in? The other thing I learned from Peter was that emotions are an evolutionary system designed to protect us. They're part of humankind growing up. Our emotions are always designed to inform us of any dangers or warn us and protect us and help us to survive. But sometimes things that we might find useful as children stay with us into our adulthood. And so some of the things that become triggers for us or things that become emotionally unsettling at times, which are designed to protect us, are really not helpful. Or it just may be that the emotion that we want to feel at a given time. I like to use the example of sometimes I'm asked to be a speaker in an organization or at a conference. And when I do that, I want to be inspirational, engaging. I want to have information packaged in a way that people understand it. And I always prepare for that and set myself up for that. But I remember one time I had looked at my phone because my phone buzzed shortly before I was going on stage one time. And I saw that it was something that wasn't good happened to somebody in my family. Now, what do? I know I got to deal with that feeling, but I also want to be able to go in front of that audience and still be the person I was going to be a moment ago, but I'm feeling something different. So how do I compartmentalize that feeling and push it aside, knowing I have to deal with it, not repress it? I know I'm going to have to deal with it, but I want to go back to being that inspiring, engaging, informing person that I was going to be a moment ago. So I've learned how to do that, but I also recognize that was the sort of the lesson. Using emotions was, am I feeling what I need to feel in this circumstance? The third thing was, how do emotions work? And the science teaches us that emotions follow certain rules, so that if you have like something in your workplace is irritating to you, somebody is playing a radio too loud or something, or they've got something on this, and you're in cubicles and you hear it and it's annoying, and you ask them, do you mind turning it down? And they don't. And in fact, they get insulted and they turn it up. So as you experience that slight irritation, now you start to get a little angry. And so the science, they said, follow certain rules. Emotions work on a continuum, if you will. Now you can spike, like you can be driving your car, whether you're in Texas or you're in Bobby or in Connecticut or wherever you are, and somebody cuts you off. And maybe you've got family with you and you're really upset after a moment of feeling quite peaceful and calm and maybe enjoying the ride until that moment. So you can spike, but a lot of times in relationships, things tend to go up or down on a continuum. Now that's really interesting. And so if you want to change how you're feeling, you think about how emotions work. That's one part. But I used to be a therapist. So one of the other things I knew was, well, psychology follows certain rules. Emotional intelligence follows certain rules. There's also the uniqueness of the person sitting in front of me that I'm talking to. Everybody isn't the same. What might work for you, Bobby, isn't necessarily what's going to work for me. And so if I said to myself, well, Bobby Ann has got something that she needs to change, I'm probably going to start with, if I was in her circumstance, what would I need to change? How would I deal with me? That's where I start. And that's where most people don't go past that. Instead, what I've learned is I've got to go past, okay, that's where I'd start if we were the same. So are we similar? Are our styles or things similar? And if not, what do I need to think about differently as I think about you? Not just how the science works, but the art is knowing who the person in front of you is. So when you're trying to help somebody change other than yourself, you want to think more just than about yourself. That's part of it. And the last part, that's the understanding piece. The last part is managing. And the managing is in two parts. And I want to play a case for you that you can listen to later that I think will show you one part of this, and it's managing emotions. There's two parts to it. One is how do you manage what's going on internally inside of you? And the second part is how can you influence how somebody else is feeling? If, in my experience, when I've given this test that they created, initially it was called the multi-factor emotional intelligence scale. Since that time, they've updated it. There's been two versions. Now there's a second called the Mesquite. Mesquite sounds like a really cool name, and it is, but it stands for Mayer Salovey Caruso Emotional Intelligence Test. That's what it stands for. So, and it's the Mesquite 2 is now available, and it basically captures the four abilities: identify, use, understand, and manage. And in managing, it captures how well somebody tends to manage their own emotions internally and how well they manage the emotions of other people. They call it emotional relationships. And I want to show you one where a person is struggling to manage her own emotions and emotional relationships in the healthcare setting. Um, so I'll do that in a second. The important thing about the roadmap to understand is that it it starts with this idea that sometimes when people are stuck, when smart people are stuck, and I've had a radio show for 16 years now, I do as a volunteer. One time I was teaching in a graduate school for psychology, the emotional intelligence in organizations. And one of my students says, Chuck, I love this emotion roadmap you've created, and you're helping us with it. You're helping us deal with our own emotional challenges. Would you think about going on the radio as a volunteer? I have a radio station I've been at for a number of years, and I'd love to have you be part of it. So it took a little while, but I've been doing it now 16 years as a volunteer, and I want more and more people to know about it. And this is a case study from my radio show very recently. So I want to show you that. But first, let me share with you the emotion roadmap. Let me just stop and ask you, Bobby, though. I talked a lot. Is any questions about any of this?
Not so far. Loving the background, and we'll probably have my students watch this because in my class, I have a class leading self and others with emotional intelligence, my master's class, because I thought the historical aspect from somebody who's a friend and colleague of all the people that kind of started this is a gem. So thank you for all of that. And then I think as I had questions, you started answering them. So I was going to ask, what's the purpose of the roadmap? And you started to answer them. So far you've answered all of my questions.
Well, the curious thing for me, actually, in terms of the people that are well known in the field, it seems like the pillars are Peter Salovey and Jack Mayer initially, and then of course David Crusoe joined them, and then Dan Goleman, who was the author of multiple books and articles, and probably the most well-known person as a writer in the field, and actually worked with Dan introducing this emotion roadmap into his own. He doesn't deal with the Mesquite, he deals with the ESCI, it's called emotional social competency inventory, and that also measures an aspect of emotional intelligence. There are several different definitions out there, as you're aware, but I taught the emotion roadmap in Dan's coaching certification program in Vienna when he was first starting that out. That was a lot of fun to do. And also Ruvan Baron, who created the EQI, which is another well-known assessment and actually, I think probably the one sold most worldwide. The EQI 2.0 was created by a fellow named Ruvan Baron. And Ruvan Baron actually saw me present the emotion roadmap in a setting. And he was fascinated by it because he never really understood how the mesquite was added value until he said, I saw your presentation, Chuck. It's the first time I thought this was really, this really made sense how it works. So Reuben was the one who said, Chuck, you need to publish about this yourself. This is yours. This is your, and so that's actually got me started. So I've been connected to a lot of the people in the field early on, and it's been great.
And you're
Um,
right about Baron. I think the majority, we just did a scoping review in the health professions about teaching emotional intelligence to health professionals, and Baron was definitely the most popular tool used in those spaces.
yeah, and again, his is a little different too. It's more trade oriented, and uh, anyway, there's a lot of definitions out there. But the important thing I think is that the roadmap that I created, at first it was tied to the Mayor Salovey work, and now really it works anywhere for anybody. You don't have to take an assessment because the key question in this is when you're not feeling the way you want to feel, when smart people are stuck, it seems to me, in all the years I've been doing the radio show and all the consulting and coaching work I've done over the years as a leadership coach, it seems that people, when they're stuck, really good critical thinkers, excellent problem solvers, when they're stuck, it's because something emotional is happening
Mhm.
inside them,
Makes sense.
or they're concerned about an emotional reaction from somebody important to them. May not be somebody they like, maybe somebody, but they just somebody they do have to deal with, and so they're concerned about the emotional reaction. So I began to think, then how do I create a series of questions? And this is what this looks like. Let me share this. See. Okay, so as you're looking at this, you can see on top it says current and future situations. So if I'm going to help somebody, and I do this in my radio show, and you'll hear it in the case I share, I've got to know what's going on for you. And sometimes people want to tell you a lot about their life story. And you can't you can't start this from after I was born. You have to start with where am I now? What's going on? And what's really important is it just something internal? Because sometimes people are challenged by something that's going on internally. It's an internal conflict. Other times it involves one or more key people. And by the way, I think the idea of who is key is a really important question because, like, if I'm going to talk to a large organization, I want to reach as many people as possible, but I'm probably not going to reach every person. But I want to know who in that audience is really key to what I want to communicate so that the organization really is going to embrace what we're talking about. And I try to find out who's key and what they care about and what's important to them so that if I do influence the way I talk about what I talk about and I think about what examples I want to use, I'm trying to tie it to what's going to be motivational to the person who's key to what I'm trying to get done. And that's an important concept too. So if you look down on the right-hand side, it says, who are all the people involved? How is each key person feeling? That's where I start. When smart people are stuck, and this is what I was saying a moment ago, it's almost always because strong emotions involved. Focusing on the emotions can help create new options for moving forward. It sometimes feels like magic to the people I work with when I do this, especially on the radio show, because I'm doing it in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. But, it's things that they've been dealing with maybe for years. And I'm helping them find what I call an emotion-based plan by focusing on the emotions that are in play. The second part is what would be ideal for each key person. And one of the ways I help people track things and learn about emotions, because I think about emotions this way, Bobby Ann. I think that we're always feeling something, but it's sort of like breathing. We're hopefully always breathing, but we're not thinking about breathing. We just breathe. It's the same thing about emotions. If you run up a flight of stairs, you're focused on your breathing, or you run a sprint or something, you feel your breathing is labored and you're focused on it. When you're obviously very upset or angry or something's happened to you, an injustice of some kind, like somebody cutting you off on the road, when you've got family in the car and you feel like they just threatened your family, not just you, and so you immediately feel something very powerful. You're very aware of your feelings in those circumstances. Or joyous when you're at a wonderful celebration of life of some kind, a wedding celebration, a birthday party of someone you care about. So these are times that we're aware more of our feelings, but most of the time we're just always feeling something. What we don't often realize, and this is after many years of working in this field, is that our feelings are always impacting what we're thinking and how we're behaving. And that's fascinating on this level because, from the standpoint of what I've learned about emotional intelligence, one of the things I learned is that certain emotions are better for particular tasks than other emotions. Some emotions that may be designed to be informative and always designed to be helpful, not always helpful, but designed to be helpful, when we're feeling them, they may actually be an obstacle to what we're trying to get done. And if that's the case, if I'm feeling something that isn't helpful, that's actually in the way of what I'm trying to do, what would be more ideal to feel? One of the key questions I came up with in trying to create something that was going to be useful is getting people to ask the question, if I'm not feeling something useful, what would be ideal to feel here? Not always happy, because happy isn't always what's ideal. I mean, we like to think about it, and it's a lazy way to sort of say, yeah, I want to be happy all the time. But sometimes I want to be focused. I want to feel focused on what I got in front of me. I got to really deal with it. If I'm too happy, I'm not focused. I lose sight of details sometimes if I'm overly joyous about something and I need to get a report out or something that needs to be a budget that I want to present to a bunch of colleagues or a tough conversation a doctor has to have with a patient. I might be really happy about something in my own life, but I can't come in smiling and thinking about all the joy in my life when I've got to tell this person something that's going to feel awful to them. So how do I feel what I need to feel in the moment? And so that's a key part of what really works here. The key question is, how do I want to feel? And one of the things I've helped people with, and anybody can do this that's listening to this, is 3 times a day, ask yourself, how are you feeling? And is it how you want to feel? And the 3 times to me are, say, mid-morning around 10, 10:30, 2:30 in the afternoon, and maybe 7 o'clock at night. And the reason for doing that, I said, some people are comfortable keeping a journal, or maybe just even jotting it in a smartphone if you can't, most people have smartphones these days. So, but just look and see if there are themes. And it isn't just the one question, how are you feeling? Because what I find myself on occasion when I've done this is I've gone down a rabbit hole by 10:30. I'm not doing what I thought I was going to do for the day. And if I catch myself at that point at 10:30, I say, wait a minute, I'm not feeling great about this. I got distracted. Something caught my eye. It's all these algorithms on our phones and our computers are designed to distract us and take us down these alleyways or down rabbit holes, or however you refer to them. It's a distraction. And I'm often not feeling good about when I've got done, when I catch myself at that. Well, how do I want to feel? I want to feel focused. I want to feel like what I said I was going to do by mid-morning is it's going to be, I'm going to able to get at least get started on it before lunchtime. And then around 2:30, same thing, you know, is what I said I was going to do by the end of the day done? Am I on track to get it done? Or if I again got diverted somehow? And in any case, people start to really find value in what they learn about themselves by doing this. The reason for doing the one in the evening, and again, I don't know if that's the exact right time for people, but on average, 7 o'clock seems reasonable. They ask, am I really present in my home? Or am I still in my head, at least at work? Am I present for my children, for my family, for my partner, for myself? Or am I still dwelling in the workplace? Because I know physically I'm here, but I'm not really here mentally or emotionally. So those are things that help people to get in touch with the power of the feelings they have and how they drive certain thoughts and behaviors. So I've written about this in other places and published about it, but it's a really powerful concept to understand that your feelings impact your thoughts and behaviors. Now the question becomes, well, what if you're not feeling what you want to feel? How do you change it? And what I found, and this, I'm particularly good at this, but anybody can learn to be better at it anyway, is what might be motivational to the person I'm talking to. What do I understand about this person? A lot of people like to use in the world that we're in, Bobby Ann, in leadership and consulting and coaching, people talk about style a lot. There's the very dictatorial, driven, ambitious, aggressive, hard charging individual style. There's the very analytic person who always wants more data, never has enough data. Are you sure or sure we're shooting at the right target? Because I don't want to shoot at the wrong target. Always questioning whether or not the person who wants to just go is going in the direction we should be going in. So there's a very analytic person. And then there's the person who is not so worried about the analytics and not so worried about the accomplishment, but is mostly concerned about how is everybody feeling about this.
Mhm.
And so there's other style issues and ways to think about style, but I think about style in this way. I think about it when I come to the understanding part, where I'm trying to think about, well, if Bobby Ann isn't feeling the way she needs to feel, and she's clear on that, and she and I have talked about what might she feel that would be more ideal, and we've kind of settled on a certain feeling. Let's say she's anxious and wants to feel calm or even confident. And we know that, and she's on board with that. What might make her feel that way? And I think about my style, but I also then think about her style because the style piece comes into play in my roadmap and the understanding how we influence others. That's where I blend the style instruments into the roadmap. Does that make sense?
It does. Which style instruments do you use?
I tend to use the disc. I like the model. The disc has four parts. But there's lots of style instruments. I mean, people like the Myers-Briggs a lot. It's
Mhm.
another style instrument that you can use. But there's a multiple number of them. But I think the important thing is understand that people do sort of have different things that drive their behavior. And by the way, I think the disc at least suggests that under certain stressful situations, styles might change as opposed to normal circumstances. And I actually like that model and it resonates with me. But the important thing is to understand how is this person different or the same as me? Because if I'm going to approach me, I probably know what works for me, but I don't know what works for you, Bobby Ann, necessarily, without knowing a little bit more about what you care about. But I've also, after years of doing this work, I'm and having been a therapist before this, um, I'm really good at understanding what's going to motivate somebody. And that's the key thing to focus on to get the behavior to change. One other thing that I think is really important is as you're trying to help people to change how they feel to be healthier. Um, One of the things that strikes me that's really important is to try to understand again what's motivational to them. But understanding what's motivational is going to be different. You can't just assume the same thing for everybody. But you can. But there are themes and I'll share with you one in the case that we're going to present. There are themes that show up repeatedly, and so I will sometimes, if I don't have much time, be prescriptive as opposed to just ask people to tell me about what they need to do. But the one thing that I found that is really useful in this model, in this roadmap, are several theoretical models. This is why David Caruso first asked to talk to me. I blended models in the background that you don't see, but I can tell you about them. One is this idea of change theory. Years ago, I was at Harvard Business School as a research associate, and I learned from my mentor at the time, a fellow named Tony Athos, that change needs to happen by creating a compelling vision of the future. There also needs to be pressure to change, otherwise, it's just an interesting vision. And third, there needs to be a first step. There needs to be a real first step that's concrete that everyone agrees to. And also, when you accomplish that first step, it's good to celebrate it because you recognize you're making progress. You're not where you need to be, but you're making progress. So those are some of the things that are built in here. So in creating the feelings that's compelling, the vision of how you want to feel versus where you are feeling, you have a current state of feelings and a future state. So that's where the change management theory blends. The other theory that's included in here is just regular problem solving theory. What's the root cause of why you're feeling the way you are, and what might be something that would help move you forward? A third, of course, is the model initially that I became exposed to on emotional intelligence, that these are abilities. And the fourth is this idea of appreciative inquiry, which is one that isn't as well known. But a lot of people who understand appreciative inquiry know that it's this idea that can we somehow in the future given our current circumstance, use something from the past that was a strength. So if I'm trying to help you move from calm or anxious, anxious to calm or confident, is there something I might say to you that suggests, Bobby Ann, I know this feels really hard and you're struggling with this, but at the same time, have you ever in your past life that you can think of, recent or a long time ago, had a circumstance where you didn't think you were going to be able to be calm and confident and you felt you needed to be and you actually achieved it? Can you go back in time and think of a time in the past where you actually were feeling the circumstances were totally different, but the feelings were similar? And if you can think of something where you were very anxious and needed to be calm and confident, and you were able to figure out how to do that, is there anything that you can borrow or learn from that we can use here? And often when that happens and a person says, you know what, there was something and it was a while ago and there's a totally different situation, but yeah, I remember what I did then. And all of a sudden, instead of the 100 ways you can find by Googling, how do you get from anxious to calm or confident? You're now starting to work on your own plan. And I'm helping you with that. And we together build on your plan, not the expert telling you what you need to do step by step in order to feel calm. I mean, I'm not saying that's a bad way to go. I'm just saying the best way to go, in my experience, is to try and find something where you feel you got something from your past that says, I can do this. And all of a sudden, when I'm talking to people, I can hear it in their tone. If I'm looking at them, I can see it in their faces and their body language. Something changes for the better. They begin to feel like they got something here that says, you know what? Maybe I don't need to be stuck anymore. And then together we kind of enhance what happened in the past and build on it. And by the time we're through, the person that's listening to me says, thank you so much. That's so helpful. And we do it pretty quick. So so those are some things that I think that's how it works. What I ask you when you've got a strategy on this managing part is the execute and modify. These are two key questions and they're very different. So, and it sounds like, wow, why would you answer no if you're able to? The first question is, what are we really able to do this? If you got a strategy that we just talked about, do you think you can do this? And the reason I say, can you think you can do this? Because sometimes it might take time you might not have. It might cost you something financially or otherwise. It might involve a skill you don't have. So while it might sound great in theory, are you really able to do it? That's one question. And let's assume you are. Then the question is, are you willing? And that sounds crazy. Of course, you just helped me find it. Yeah, but we're not always willing. I mean, again, it's a longer story. I don't want to go into that, but I can tell you that in my experience, there are times when people have a strategy, we agree that it would work, and I will never do that because of the person I'm involved with, or just something in my head, or some experience in my background that says I'll never do that. Okay. I don't find it useful to spend a lot of time trying to sell people on a strategy that they will never do. So let's see if there's something else then. And until we find something that you can answer, yes, I'm willing and actually excited to do it and able to do it, then you probably don't have much a good plan. But when you have a good emotion-based plan, I call it, when you can say, yes, absolutely, I can do it. I have the resources, capability, competency, and I attitudinally, I can't wait to try it. I'm excited. The second I hang up or we stop talking, I'm going to do this. On the other side of the chart here, just to go back up, the emotion roadmap is an emotion-based planning and problem-solving process. It can be tactical, like what we're talking about, just in an instant. I'm also working with a group right now that's going through an organizational change. And organizational change, this is very interesting. One of the people I got to know when I was at Harvard Business School is a fellow named John Kotter. John was very famous for writing about change, but he was a data geek. He was the most analytic person I've ever met in my life. But in his recent writings, the more recent writings he had, he realized the reason a lot of change efforts fail is because people don't pay attention to the emotions involved. He got that, and he began to realize that you got to pay attention. And then the question is, how do you pay attention? So in my work, what I found when I'm working with a chief executive officer or president doing kind of large scale change, I'm looking at who are we changing to? I have a model. I think I may have shared that model with you, but anyway, it's the idea is what are we trying to create here? And then the same fellow that taught me about change taught me about this idea of a holistic model, a 7S model of management, which included at the heart what Tony called superordinate goals. Over the time got changed to shared values, and more recently I've changed to shared feelings, surrounded by other S's: strategy, structure, systems, skills, style, and staff. And you can holistically look at your entire organization thinking like that. One of the pieces that I think are really important, though, when you're dealing with change all the time, is who are the key players and what exactly are going to be the goals for those people in the next 12 to 18 months. Not not who you're thinking of that's the person you want for the job, but what is the job? Because oftentimes we think about the person and then we think we know what they're good at, so we think that's what they need to be good at. No, start with what is it that you have as goals for this person? What parts of this person's organizational responsibilities are going to have to be achieved in 6 months, 12 months, 24 months? What exactly are you saying this person's roles, as clear as you can, roles and responsibilities? What are their accountabilities and what are their authority levels to get those accountabilities met? Spell out as much of that as you can, as clearly as you can up front, and then monitor closely once the organization changes are announced, whether it's all working the way that you all conceived and hoped it would work, because it often doesn't work exactly right. But if you can go through all these conversations proactively up front about change. Well, I was just talking to the CEO about something about this just yesterday, actually. And, he was concerned about how many meetings he's going to have with all these people who are going to be in new roles. I said, it's better to have more meetings now because if you don't get this clear, you're going to have a lot more meetings later. But if you force yourself to make the time to check in with everybody pretty regularly, if not weekly, bi-weekly, about how are you doing? Is it what we talked about? Any questions? Did we describe all this right? Then emotionally, everybody feels like this is working the way we want because the role is expansive when we're checking in early on and it's tight. It's going to keep growing as we grow confidence in each other and what we predicted would happen is happening. Or if it's not happening, we're modifying it as we go. As opposed to we think we got it all right, go out, go forth, do good, and then finding out it's not working. And then you start pulling back and the trend is going the wrong way. And that's what I mean by more meetings, because now you're trying to focus on how do you reel them back in and change things later on. So again, that's a strategic way to use this stuff, as opposed to the one-off where you just got an event where you're trying to feel differently in the moment. So that's the tactical and strategic, and then the science is knowing how emotions work, and the art is understanding the persons in front of you, the key people in front of you. So that's what the roadmap is. Any questions about that?
No, I think it's very helpful. It's super interesting. I'm familiar with appreciative inquiry because all of our simulation folks use it. I'm also hearing a little bit of motivational interviewing in there as a maybe another a fifth
A
set
fifth
of
theory that's in there.
yeah,
It's
a fifth theory that you're potentially using because motivational interviewing, it sounds like you're kind of using that as you're helping them to make those changes and move them forward.
I'm trying to learn what they care about. Here's a quick example of a business situation because you deal with a lot of executives too. So I know we're going to talk about a healthcare case in a minute, but in dealing with an executive, I was called in to help a vice president of sales at an organization where he's highly successful with his sales organization, but he was disliked by a lot of people in the rest of the organization. And the CEO called me in and asked, "Can I help him change behavior?" And so Richard Boyatzis has written a whole bunch about intentional change theory, and he writes about the executive who's asked to change, who changes due to compliance because he realizes or she realizes that she's in trouble or he's in trouble if he doesn't. But it's not sustainable. It's not real change. It's just to mask over the problems that the person's facing in the moment. But what Richard suggests is this vision of yourself in the future. Again, a change management concept of what's the compelling vision of you down the road, 15, 20 years out? Who do you want to be? And how does what you're doing today impact or relate to the person you want to be in the future? I think that's a great idea. I also think though that I want to know in the moment, what can I say to this person that's going to help them to change, that's to make the change in a sustainable way. And so with this particular executive, I gave him this test that we talked about, this Mesquite test, and found that he was high in almost everything, which is unusual. Usually people have some things are high and other things are not. He was high in all of it. So it wasn't a skill deficiency or competency deficiency in terms of emotional intelligence. But the way he viewed the rest of the organization, the problems he was having was that his salespeople overachieved. He was driven to achieve himself. He was hard, but fair, and they loved him. But they kept coming in with more work than the organization seemed to be able to handle. And so he was upset with the back office people that weren't able to support all these sales. I said, well, what are you doing to manage the back office people? He said, that's not my job. That's not what I don't want to do. That's somebody else's job. So you don't spend any time talking to them or helping them understand why it's important for them to try and stay late, maybe on certain days, to try and help you achieve certain customer expectations that your salespeople may have overpromised, but or maybe it was what they were told to say because we thought we could do it. We just didn't know we we're going to have so many sales. I mean, so it's real problems. But I said, you have the capability of influencing how these people support you. But what I'm hearing is nobody really feels that from you. Nobody gets that you care about them. And you're telling me that you might care about them, but it's not your job to care about them. So you don't demonstrate that. I said, let me ask you something. And this is the motivational key that you're talking about, motivational interviewing. I said, what matters most to you? Isn't it achieving your goals? Absolutely. I want to achieve more. You understand that they're part of your ability to achieve more is how well these people support your organization. Yes, I do. So can I suggest to you that your skill set, if you choose to use it with those people, will change everything in terms of how they, I mean, not that they can be, I mean, if you just keep coming in with more sales, you're going to have more staff. But I mean, that they're going to, what they can do, nobody's going to go home at 5 o'clock just because I could have done something for another 5 minutes that would have helped you out, but I don't want to help you out. They're going to stay a half hour later because they want to help you out. If you start doing the things that you do with your sales team, taking them to lunch, stopping in the hallway, learning their names, their families, their what they care about, and using the skill. I don't have to tell you how to do that because you know how to do that. It's just whether you want to or not. But I think you want to achieve more, right? He said that makes perfect sense. A year or two later, he was promoted to president of that organization. Everything changed. But that was the key. I had to find what was motivational to him in order to get him. Oh, by the way, he didn't just do this on his own. He went across to the person whose organization it was and said, would it be okay? Because again, he had that skill set. He knew he couldn't just go talk to them without. So that was a pretty good example of someone in, that again, how the motivation piece works.
Mm-hmm.
So that does track, I think, a little bit with what you're saying about motivational interviewing. Does that sound right?
Mm-hmm. I think so.
Okay. All right. So let me show you the case, and that would be the last thing. Okay.
Okay.
So we got changes. Let's see. Can you see that now?
Yes.
Okay. And did I click sound on this? You may not be able to hear it. Let's see. Could you hear that?
I did not.
Okay. So I got to see where you said it's on the side here, right?
Yeah, whenever you go to share it, you have to click the share and then it'll give you the little option of share sound.
Let me stop sharing and then do that again. Here it is. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Share. Okay. Let's see if you can hear this now. talking to, please?
Hi, this is Kelly.
Hi. So we're going to talk to Kelly. You can hear it. That's great. Just so you know, and you'll hear this in a conversation, but I'm going to stop it a couple of times because Kelly's calling up and she's just found out some disturbing news about her circumstance and she wants to share it with me and see if I can be helpful to her. So again, if you think about the roadmap, what we just looked at, you're looking at how is she feeling? How might the other people involved, which in this case are her husband and her son, going to be feeling? How does she want to feel? How does she want them to feel? That's
Perfect.
the
And
focus.
I do have a hard stop at the half hour, so just a heads up for that.
We should be fine.
Okay.
Hi, Kelly. Thanks for calling in. How can I help you?
Hi. So it's funny that you have this topic because we just found out that my husband has been diagnosed with a disease that is progressive. And I just learned about this, so it's very new.
It's raw. I can hear it. Yeah.
It's very new. However, we're not that old of a couple. I'm 7 years younger.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're not that old. He will be 51 and I'm 44. And we have a young child who we had later in life. And I feel like I have many feelings.
Sure.
But one of them is, I know he's going to need help with this. And it's emphysema. We don't know a lot about it yet, but we'll learn more. But my concern is, one of them is, as someone who's his partner, I want to be there for him, but I also don't know how to take care of myself. I'm somebody who is better at taking care of other people than taking care of myself. And I don't want to go down in the process. I don't want to neglect myself in this process of being a strong partner for him. So I kind of I feel a little bit lost. And I don't know. I guess I want to know, how do I maintain goals for myself and take care of myself while also being strong and supportive for another person, and to model that for my young son who's going to be 4. He's very young.
Right. So you're going to learn about what surrounds the disease and what's likely to happen and how that's going to impact your world, and your concerns are wanting to be able to be a role model for your son on the one hand. You want to be there for your partner, but you also are very scared, it sounds like, of what's going to happen to you, because you don't tend to focus on taking care of yourself sometimes. And that's the struggle that you're facing right now. You don't want to sound selfish, but at the same time, you don't want to lose yourself in this. I'm stopping it here because some important things have just happened that I'm listening to. First, I'm summarizing what I heard, but I also heard she's someone, and I found this when I've given the Mesquite to a lot of people over time, this emotional intelligence test, that sometimes people show up as they have a high score on emotional relationships, taking care of others, but they have a low score on emotion management, taking care of themselves. And so I'm going to be prescriptive later on because I think that's what I'm hearing in Kelly. And I want to give her some tools because I think what she needs to hear, she needs to be okay taking care of herself. And she's someone who thinks that's selfish. She didn't say that, but that's what I think I'm hearing. Okay.
Right. And I have so frequently. I've been through a lot with my husband in the past. We've gone through a lot of financial turmoil, and I've really been very supportive of him throughout our whole marriage. And I feel like a lot of times I have neglected myself, and I've put off things that I've really wanted to do. And I feel like I know that I won't be able to be a good partner if I'm not also taking care of myself as well. And so I guess I just want a little guidance in how do you continue to be supportive of somebody, but also make sure that you take care of yourself.
Well, I think it's going to be different for lots of people. Everybody's sort of somewhat unique, but I don't think your circumstance isn't unique at all. But the idea of, who you are and what your experiences are and why you feel the way you do and why you may not take care of yourself is unique to you. I mean, that's however you were raised, whatever you believe is important in life. Those are things that you kind of carry with you. One of the things that jumps out at me, Kelly, and maybe this is helpful to just think about as a metaphor, is do you fly at all? Have you been on airplanes with your child?
Yes, I have. Yep.
And the flight attendant talks about the oxygen mask dropping down, what they say to the parents in the airplane.
Yeah. You put it on yourself first. They see that, which sounds counterintuitive.
Because you want to make sure your child's okay, but in trying to help your child, you might pass out.
Right.
To me, for you and for everybody else that's listening that has this capacity to do for others at the same time while you're draining yourself, I think it's really important to hold on to that metaphor. You can't be good to other people. You can't be there for them unless you know you're okay and you're doing things that make sure you're okay and that feels right to you, not selfish. Because there's something that causes people that believe what you believe. And excuse me for being prescriptive here, but you're not the first person I've talked to who's had, has had this kind of experience. And so for me, is this okay to suggest this to you?
Yes, it is.
Okay, because it sounds like you're asking for some help with this. And I'm stopping again because I do like to ask, is it okay to make a suggestion? Because sometimes people are not okay, and you want to know that before you get into an argument. But that's what I thought you was looking for. I just wanted to confirm that. That's why I asked that. And you want somebody that might have some kind of expertise in this to say, this is okay. And it's not only okay.
Yeah, exactly. It's something, right. I struggle with this and I want to change that. And I've been working toward changing that in myself. But then there's a new curveball that when you least expect it, it presents you have another challenge in life that you didn't foresee.
So one of the things that for you to feel comfortable and okay taking care of you, this is the key. You got to know that isn't a selfish behavior, Kelly. It's a behavior that is focused on being there for your child and your husband. Because if you're draining yourself and allowing yourself to be emptied and just be, tired all the time, exhausted, you have no resilience and you just can't pick yourself up in the morning, that helps nobody.
Right. Yeah, that is helpful that's really important to keep in mind.
So one of the perspectives that you need is what's okay. I mean, you can't go wild with this, and I don't think you will. But what is going to be? And this is where you want to think through. So how do I get there? Okay, so if you accept that, I'm saying yes, as an expert in the field of being helpful to other people and relationships and all of that. Yes, you need to take care of yourself. Okay, it's nice to hear that, but how do I actually do it? So this is where we explore the understanding part. What is it going to take to make that happen? She's buying into, that makes sense, but what do I do?
Yeah.
And that's kind of key,
I know certain things make me feel better. Like I know having time to exercise is like that is so important to me, but it's crazy how something so simple can sometimes be so, I don't know, not get prioritized, I guess. So just something like simple, like exercise and then continuing to maintain some type of like bonding, like type of fun thing with like a date or something like that, which would be separate from his illness. Like it would just be normal, something like that.
Something like a date night that you pick, that the two of you go out, or but maybe even friends, something that you do with friends on occasion.
Yeah.
Even though everybody feels like they need me all the time at the moment, I need to know that I got a day with friends, I got a date with my husband, and that I can go out and exercise. And my explanation to my husband and to my child is, I want to be there as strong as I can be for you, and I need to do these things so that I can be.
Yeah, that is helpful. It's just helpful to hear, but it's also helpful to hear that there's other people in a similar situation, because it does feel isolating.
I mean, a lot of people have financial difficulties, and people face that from time to time, and they deal with it as best they can. But health things, they tend to not get better sometimes.
Right.
And so if you're going down a trail on a road that knows that it doesn't have a happy ending, well, I mean, we all end at some point. Everything ends at some point. But what can we do along the way to make sure that we have moments in time where it feels like it's worth it? That we're doing things for all of us together to make us a family feel like it's worth it. And I need for myself as an individual to feel like it's worth it at least some of the time so that I can be there to be as strong as I need to be for the others.
Right.
All of us face challenges, emotional challenges that sometimes stomach us. But I think if we can help people and help yourself understand how do you want to feel and how do you want your loved ones to feel, and if that means that you got to make time for you and you talk with them about it, you're transparent about it, you're authentic about it, that, you know, you're worried and you're scared, but you're going to be as strong as you can be. And these are the things that I need in order to make that happen. So nobody's upset if you're taking time out to go run or go exercise, whatever that looks like, or that you have some kind of social group because you have other people you can talk to and you're not always focused on just your family.
Right. Yeah. That seems important too.
Those are all things that usually help in these kinds of circumstances, Kelly.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I really do appreciate it. I really do.
Okay. Well, thanks for calling in, and I appreciate your calling in and having the courage to call in. And I hope that what I've said really resonates with you. And again, I think for me that metaphor about sitting on that plane and thinking about it, I want to help my kid, but if I help my kid and I pass out, I'm not helping anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a good metaphor, which I hadn't thought of at all, but it makes a lot of sense. So I will use that. I will definitely use that. I thank you so much for your insights and thoughts.
You're welcome, Kelly, and best of luck with this.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Bye now.
So that's it.
That was great. There are so many people that need to hear that exact session. All the people that you're talking about where they score really high on the space of maintaining and building relationships, but not so much in their own space.
So that's what I had for you this morning.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm definitely going to have my master's students watch this video so that they can get that historical fun aspect from somebody who's in the know, and then also from the aspect of how do you really whenever I do my conflict management stuff, I call it diagnosing conflict. This is like diagnosing emotions, right? How do you diagnose those emotions and potentially create a script for going forward?
Well, I'm glad we had the chance, Bobby Ann, that you and I got to do this today. And if there's a chance to ever work with you on this in real time, that'd be fun to do. And I'm sure you'll find creative ways to use it going forward. So
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Have a
Okay.
lovely rest of your day.
You too. Take care, Bobby Ann. I'll send this to you hopefully in the next week or two, but I'll get to it.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.